Hello guys, it's me, Greed here. Double Shield was a composition created in 2019 with the addition of Roll Queue, I believe it was August, and the addition of Sigma. When Sigma released with the addition of Roll Queue, he was very quickly adopted into a composition called Double Shield, which was the primary use case of Orisa and Sigma used in combination to make a bunker style composition that managed to negate the weaknesses of prior bunker compositions. However, most people, even though I've made so many videos about it, still don't actually know why Double Shield existed, what made it so strong, and why 6 years later we are still playing Double Shield. Back in 2019, we obviously had Double Shield, like I said, and it was because of the addition of Sigma during Roll Queue and the combination of Orisa. Now, obviously, we had bunker comps before. We had things where, like, you would have Orisa and Reinhardt, but why was Orisa and Reinhardt not considered to be Double Shield, but Orisa and Sigma were? It was because Orisa and Sigma both had the ability to poke from behind their shields while their shields were up, unlike Reinhardt. Not only this, they also had mass sustainability cooldowns. For example, Orisa had Fortify and Sigma had Flux and Rock, as well as other cooldowns like Pool, that made it so actually fighting straight forward into this composition was extremely difficult. Now, old bunker comps used to have the weakness of being able to be forced out or broken by dive compositions, and the way it would work was a dive composition would commit to going to their backline, and they would be able to cut resources from their front line, allowing their DPS on very specific angles in order to spam their tanks down, with the resources obviously being cut and therefore killing them or their backline or whatever else it may be. So, if Orisa Sigma Double Shield is just another style of bunker comp, and bunker comps are susceptible to being dove and having their resources cut, why is it that Double Shield was notorious for being undiveable? Well, it's actually because Double Shield was not purely about the existence of Orisa and Sigma together. In fact, I would say Double Shield was 40% about Orisa and Sigma, and 60% about two other very, very, very badly implemented heroes, Brigitte and Baptiste. The reason you were able to get such an incredible composition, that is Double Shield, was almost entirely due to the fact that you had Baptiste's ability to spam out very high burst AoE healing in a very condensed area, thus healing absolutely everyone on your team while providing regenerative burst cooldown, the window for increased damage or sustainability depending on which one they needed, as well as the classic immortality field that was used in the original Double Shield composition to sustain a bastion. However, as time went on and people got smarter, they actually realized that the best way to play the comp was not to bunker down with a bastion, but to actually play relatively split apart and actually destroy angles, lanes, and so on, instead of just being one big clump, because they realized that the comp was actually partially beatable if you allowed people to get on multiple angles and actually spam out their backline a bit to force them out of position. But, as people learned, the Sigma players also improved at the game and realized they were able to just simply cut off angles and stop them from happening. Then we have Brig. Probably the main reason Double Shield happened. Brig was your classic anti-dive, unbeatable raid boss tank of Overwatch 1. If you tried to dive her, you were dead. If you tried to take an off angle against her, you were dead. There was absolutely nothing you could do to get onto a team if a Brig didn't want you to. Even in compositions where it was multiple dive heroes, like 6 dive heroes, you would expect at least one of them would get through a Brig. And you're absolutely right. One, let's say, monkey would jump, the Brig would whip shot him away, the Diva would continue flight, and then she would proceed to get skull-fucked into atomization by the Brig. And there's nothing you can really do about that. So, That is why Double Shield happened. It was actually a combination of 4 heroes, where you had a very strong, sustainable frontline with 2 shield characters that were able to poke at the same time, as well as had mass sustainability cooldowns such as Rock, Flux, Fortify, Pull, and so on. And you also had an extremely strong backline with Bap and Brig, where they were both able to provide mass AoE sustained burst healing, as well as anti-dive and dueling capabilities, unlike a lot of other supports at the time. This would eventually move on to Zen and Brig eventually being very good, and this is for a similar reason, where if you just kill the entire enemy team fast enough, then you don't actually need to heal your own team, which is why we had Zen Brig for years. Anyway, why is it that I say 6 years after the notorious release of the Double Shield composition do I still believe we're playing Double Shield? Well, if you look at the game's current iteration, the main mode is 5v5, and when the move to 5v5 actually occurred, it made it so that the supports didn't have that off tank anymore to help provide peel for them. You couldn't expect a Zarya bubble on you anymore when you were getting dove by a monkey. You couldn't expect a hog hook anymore when the soldier was on the off angle shooting at you, and a plethora of other ways that off tanks could peel. You could no longer expect to receive those, and therefore you were more vulnerable. Because of the vulnerability of the supports, they decided that the best course of action to keep them alive was to buff them into the stratosphere. So you can obviously see why I'm saying that I believe Double Shield to be an existing factor in 5v5 still, because of the fact that you have a mass survivability tank that is getting infinitely sustained by mass sustained supports with AoE burst healing, with survivability cooldowns like Emo, Life Grip, Suzu, as well as other things like Larry Pylon, allowing for bunker style compositions to exist even more freely than before. So that is why I think Double Shield still exists in 5v5, because to me, Double Shield does not mean 2 shields. It means a very, very, very mass sustained frontline with an undiveable backline. It means a composition that lacks a clear weakness outside of the players playing poorly. Now, realistically, if the team played perfectly with this style of composition, they should win every time, because it's basically unbeatable. The only way you would ever fail this comp is to be beaten by the fact that you are not playing well. However, we haven't talked about 6v6 yet, where there are 2 tanks, and that exists there too, because of the hero design. So, in 6v6, the most played tank composition right now is Ramatra and Sigma together, because you get the same thing. You get Ramatra's big nemesis form that gives him armor, you have Ramatra's block, you have Ravenous Vortex to stop dives, rushes, and other things, you've got Sigma's rock, his flux, his shield, Ram's shield, and you've also got mass sustain in the backline, whether it comes from any of the supports outside of realistically Mercy. You can put anyone back there and you're likely going to have that mass sustain that you're looking for, and that's why Double Shield still continues to be a thing. The overbuffed, massively broken supports are able to infinitely sustain the insanely overpowered and downright unfair tank heroes in this game. But it's not the fault of the tank heroes or the support heroes. It's neither of them. They've obviously both got their issues. I don't think Suzu should exist. Some people do. I don't think Ram Block should exist. Some people do. And these cooldowns aren't necessarily problematic on their own. In a vacuum, these things generally are okay. What makes them so cancerous is when they are combined with the fact that the supports were given mass survivability buffs going into 5v5. So not only are you still getting your Suzu, you're also getting more healing, more damage, more maneuverability, more mobility, more playmaking ability, and generally speaking, more ability to just kind of kill anything that you want. And pair that with the tanks that are given massive damage buffs, survivability buffs, cooldown reductions, health buffs, more armor, and so on. It becomes the fact that all of these things, when put together, make an extremely AIDS experience that I personally do not enjoy playing, and haven't really enjoyed playing for the last 6 years. Because to me, the same reason that Double Shield existed in 2019 is the same reason we're playing the compositions we are today. It is still having an influence over the game 6 years later. If you think prior to Double Shield meta, before the release of Sigma, there were many other type of compositions you could play. Obviously, you'd play dive, you'd play rush, brawl, death ball. There were infinite amounts of comps you could play. However, I think every composition today, whether it's in 5v5 or 6v6, is rooted in the idea of double shield. Because every time you pick a composition, you are likely picking heroes that add to the sustainability of your very, very strong frontline that is near undiveable, just how it was for double shield. Now, is it fair to call it the same thing, double shield? Not really. It's a play on the old compositions, and the old composition is functioning the way it was, in the same way that today's compositions are functioning how they are. They function the same way, so it would be fair to call them both double shield, but they both have different parameters. Because you could call it a goats comp. That's the same reason a goats comp existed. It was the mass sustainability from Brig and Moira and Lucio, and then eventually Zenyatta was added to that composition for additional damage, Diva, Rhine, Zarya, all of these things. So you could technically call it a goats comp as well, but I'm more comfortable calling it a double shield comp because double shield comps tend to be more passive, more poke based, you know, less player interaction, which I think is what the game is heading towards today. We saw the Genji projectile change, that's more poke based. We saw the Echo spread buff, that's a poke change. There is a massive leniency in the recent years to make the game more poke heavy, and the more poke heavy they make it, the better Sigma and Ram and everything like that get, and the more double shield gets, in my opinion. And that's why I think 6 years later we are still playing double shield. If you disagree, I'd love to hear why. I love you all. I hope you have a good day. Mwah. Mwah. Goodbye. Mwah. Mwah. Have a good day.